My lazy children found out that I had bought a new house for $800,000 in the best neighborhood in the city. But instead of being happy for me, they showed up the very next day with a lawyer, demanding that I put their names on the deed of my new property. That was when I handed them the black folder with just one piece of paper inside, and what was written there made them completely regret ever trying to pull a stunt like that with me. But let me tell you how I got to that moment, because the story did not start that day. It was a Tuesday morning when I opened the front door of my house and saw Harper and Caleb standing in front of me. They were not alone. Next to them was a man in a dark suit with a leather portfolio tucked under his arm. My daughter had that smile I knew all too well, the one she had used since she was a little girl when she wanted to manipulate me to get something. Caleb stood behind her, arms crossed, wearing that look of superiority he had perfected over the years. They did not say good morning. They did not ask how I had slept. They did not give me a hug. They simply walked into my living room as if the house still belonged to them, as if I were merely a temporary tenant in my own home. The man in the suit introduced himself as Attorney Richard Sterling, a specialist in family law and estates. He extended his hand with a cold, calculated courtesy. I shook it, not yet understanding what was happening, although something in the pit of my stomach warned me that this was not a social call. Harper made herself comfortable on my sofa without waiting for an invitation. She crossed her legs, placed her designer handbag on the coffee table, and pulled out her phone as if she were in any random waiting room. Caleb walked straight to the kitchen and came back with a glass of water. He did not ask permission. He did not ask if he could. He simply did it, as if this were still his house, as if I were invisible. I remained standing in the middle of my own living room, feeling the air grow heavier with every second that passed. Harper finally looked up from her phone and spoke. "Mom, we need to talk about your new house." Her voice sounded soft, almost maternal, but I could hear the steel beneath every word. I sat down slowly in the armchair, the only space left available. The lawyer opened his portfolio and pulled out some documents. He placed them on the table with precise, rehearsed movements. Harper leaned forward, clasping her hands as if she were about to give me important news. "We found out you bought a property for $800,000 in Oak Creek Estates." Her tone was accusatory, as if I had committed a crime. Caleb nodded from his spot by the window, watching me like a judge who had already passed sentence. "Yes," I replied calmly. "I bought a house. It is my money and my decision." Harper let out a brief, bitter laugh. "Mom, that is not fair. We are your children. We have a right to know these things. We have a right to be included in your financial decisions." Caleb took a step forward. "Besides, Mom, at your age you should already be thinking about the future, about our inheritance, about what you are going to leave behind when you are gone. You cannot be so selfish." The word selfish rang in my ears like a sharp slap. Me, who had worked since I was 16. Me, who had been widowed at 42 with 2 teenage children. Me, who never bought a new dress if they needed shoes for school. I was the selfish one. Attorney Sterling cleared his throat and spoke with a professional, distant voice. "Mrs. Vance, my clients have hired me to advise them on this matter. They consider that, given your age and family situation, the most prudent course of action would be to include their names on the deed of the new property. That way, future complications are avoided, and the family assets are protected." Family assets. What pretty words to describe something I had bought with my own sweat, with my own sacrifice, without asking for a single dime from either of them. Harper stood up and walked toward me. She knelt in front of my chair and took my hands in hers. Her eyes were moist, but I knew those tears were as fake as her concern. "Mom, we are doing this for your own good. We do not want problems in the future. We do not want strangers taking advantage of you. We are your family. We are the only ones who really care about you." I looked at her hands holding mine, soft hands, perfectly manicured, without a single mark of real labor. I remembered my own hands at her age, red and cracked from washing other people's laundry, from scrubbing houses, from cooking for parties where I was never invited as a guest. Caleb approached as well. "Mom, we are not asking you to give us the house. We just want our names on the deed. It is normal. It is what all families do. That way, when you pass, we will not have to go through long and expensive probate procedures. When I pass, as if they were already planning my funeral, as if I were merely an obstacle between them and what they considered their natural right. Attorney Sterling pulled out more papers. "I have a very simple document here, Mrs. Vance. We just need you to sign here, authorizing the inclusion of Harper Vance and Caleb Vance as co-owners of the residence located at 325 Magnolia Drive, Oak Creek Estates." He put the pen in my hand. Harper squeezed my fingers with feigned tenderness. Caleb smiled with the absolute confidence of someone who has never heard the word no. And in that moment, sitting in my own armchair, surrounded by my own children and a lawyer I did not know from Adam, I felt something I had not felt in 67 years of life. I felt absolute clarity. I felt the strength of all the times I had remained silent, of all the times I had yielded, of all the times I had put their needs before mine. I left the pen on the table without signing anything. "No," I said simply. Harper blinked, confused. "What do you mean, no, Mom?" Caleb frowned. The lawyer adjusted his glasses and looked at me as if he had not understood correctly. "I am not going to sign that," I repeated with a firmer voice. "I am not going to put your names on the deed to my house." Harper stood up abruptly. "Mom, do not be ridiculous. We are your children. We have a right." "A right to what?" I asked. "Exactly. I gave you the best education I could. I paid for 4 years of college for both of you. I bought your first cars. I gave you money every time you asked, and many times when you did not even need it. That was your obligation as a mother," Caleb interrupted coldly. "We did not ask to be born." His words fell on me like stones, but they no longer hurt like before. I no longer had that desperate need to be loved by them, to be valued, to be seen. Attorney Sterling tried to mediate. "Mrs. Vance, please understand that my clients only seek to protect their legitimate interests over something I bought with my money," I replied, looking him straight in the eye. Harper changed tactics. She started crying for real now, with dramatic sobs. "I cannot believe you are being so cruel, Mom. After everything we have been to you, after everything we have endured." "What exactly have you endured?" I asked. "Having a mother who worked 3 jobs so you could go to private schools? Having a mother who went without eating so you would have meat on your plates? Having a mother who never said no to anything?" Caleb slammed his fist on the table. "Enough of that martyr story, Mom. You did what you had to do. Now it is your turn to do the right thing by us. The right thing." What an interesting concept coming from a 39-year-old man who had never held a job for more than 6 months. I stood up. "I think this conversation is over. I am asking you to leave my house." The lawyer put his documents away with tense gestures. "Mrs. Vance, I warn you that my clients are willing to take legal measures if you do not cooperate." "Let them do whatever they consider necessary," I replied, walking toward the door. Harper followed me. "This is not going to stay like this, Mom. We are going to fight for what belongs to us." Caleb caught up to her, and both looked at me with a hatred so pure I could almost touch it. The 3 of them left my house, leaving a heavy and dark silence behind. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my legs tremble. But it was not fear I felt. It was something different. It was determination, because they did not know something fundamental. They did not know that I had been preparing for this moment for the last 3 years. They did not know what was inside the black folder I kept in my bedroom. They did not know that every cruel word, every gesture of contempt, every time they had treated me as if I were invisible, I had been documenting it, and very soon they were going to discover exactly how prepared I was. After they left, I sat in my living room for hours. The afternoon light came through the window, painting long shadows on the floor. I had polished myself so many times. I looked at my hands, these 67-year-old hands that had worked tirelessly since I could remember. "I need you to understand how I got here. I need you to know who I was before I became the invisible woman my children saw when they looked at me. I was born in a small town in the Rust Belt, where women learned from childhood that their value lay in serving. My mother taught me to cook, to clean, to be quiet. My father never asked me what I wanted to be when I grew up because for him the answer was obvious. I would be a wife. I would be a mother. I would be the shadow of someone more important. I married Bob when I was 23. He was handsome, hard-working, and promised me a better life than the one I had known. For the first few years, He was good to me. We had Harper when I was 25. Caleb arrived 3 years later. I left my job at the fabric store to take care of them full time because that was what was expected of me. Bob worked at an auto parts factory. We did not earn much, but it was enough to live with dignity. I stretched every dollar as if it were made of rubber. I bought the cheapest cuts of meat and turned them into meals that looked like they came from a restaurant. I sewed the children's clothes when they tore. I never threw away anything that could be repaired. When Harper turned 14, Bob died. It was an accident at the factory, a poorly calibrated machine, a second of distraction. I became a widow at 42 with 2 teenage children and a Social Security check that barely covered the rent. That was the first time my children saw me cry. But it was also the last time I allowed myself that luxury, because now everything depended on me. There was no one else. There was no safety net. There was no backup plan. I got work cleaning houses. I got up at 5 in the morning to get to the first house by 7. I cleaned 4 houses a day, Monday through Saturday. On Sundays, I did other people's laundry, charging a few cents per pound. My hands cracked from the bleach. My back ached every night. But Harper and Caleb had to finish school. Harper wanted to study business administration. Caleb wanted to be an engineer. I wanted them to have the opportunities I never had. I wanted them not to depend on anyone. I wanted them to be free in a way I had never been. I worked double shifts for 6 years to pay for their private university tuition. They complained because it was not the most prestigious one in the state. They were ashamed when their classmates asked what their mother did for a living. They learned to say that I was a homemaker, as if scrubbing other people's toilets was not real work. Harper graduated and got a job at a mid-sized company. Caleb took 7 years to finish a 4-year degree because he failed classes and changed his major every semester. I paid for every summer course, every repeated class, every book he supposedly needed and never opened. When he finally graduated, I hoped things would improve. I hoped that now that they were both professionals, now that I had given them everything I promised to give, maybe they would see me differently. Maybe they would thank me. Maybe they would invite me to rest. But none of that happened. Harper married a man who earned good money and moved to a condo in the most expensive part of the city. She invited me over only once. She made me feel so out of place with her comments about my clothes, my way of speaking, my lack of education, that I never went back. She did not insist either. Caleb lived with me until he was 35. He did not pay rent. He did not buy groceries. He did not clean. He would work for a few months and quit. Then he would spend another few months on my sofa watching television and telling me he was looking for something better, something that deserved his talent. I kept cleaning houses. Now I was 60, and my body protested every movement. But I could not stop because I had to support my adult son, who could not find anything good enough for him. One day, while cleaning Mrs. Margaret Sullivan's house, she found me crying in her kitchen. I tried to apologize, to dry my tears, to keep working, but Margaret sat down with me and forced me to tell her everything. "Eleanor," she told me, taking my hands, "you do not owe your entire life to your children. You already gave them everything a mother can give. Now you have to think about yourself." "But they need me," I replied with a broken voice. "No," she corrected me firmly. "They use you. There is a huge difference." Margaret was 64 and a widow like me, but she had made different decisions. When her children grew up, she sold her big house and bought a small apartment. She invested the rest of the money. She traveled twice a year. She had friends. She had a life of her own. She offered to help me. She took me to a financial advisor who was a friend of hers. That man, Mr. James Bennett, reviewed my situation with patience. He explained that despite earning little, I had been very disciplined. I had never gone into debt. I always paid everything on time. I had a perfect credit score. He showed me something I did not know. During all those years cleaning houses, I had been paying into Social Security. I had the right to a decent monthly benefit. And furthermore, the house where I lived with Caleb, that house I had been renting for 25 years, was for sale. The owner wanted to retire and move to the country. I could buy it, James told me. With a small loan and my Social Security as collateral, that house could be mine. I could not believe it. To have something of my own, something no one could take away from me. It took me 6 months to gather the courage to do it. But finally, I signed the papers. The house was mine. For the first time in 63 years, I had something with my name on the deed. Caleb got angry when he found out. He thought I should have put his name on it too. He thought he had an automatic right because he lived there. We argued continuously. He said horrible things to me. He called me selfish, a bad mother, a bitter old woman. That night I packed his things and asked him to leave. He left cursing, slamming the door, swearing he would never forgive me. Harper called the next day to scream at me over the phone. How could I kick my own son out onto the street? What kind of mother was I? Neither of them asked where Caleb was going to live. Neither offered to let him stay with them. Harper had 3 empty bedrooms in her luxury condo, but Caleb ended up renting a room in a cheap boarding house. For 2 years, I heard nothing from my children. 2 years of absolute silence. They did not call on my birthday. They did not call at Christmas. They did not call when I got sick with pneumonia and spent a week in the hospital. It was Margaret who took care of me. It was Margaret who paid for my medication when my check did not stretch far enough. It was Margaret who taught me that family is not just blood. Family is who shows up when everything falls apart. In those 2 years, I discovered something wonderful. I discovered guilt-free silence. I discovered what it felt like not to have to justify every dollar I spent. I discovered I could buy myself a new dress without anyone making me feel bad about it. I started saving seriously. Every month I put away a part of my income. I stopped cleaning houses because my back could no longer take it. But I found work caring for an elderly lady 3 times a week. It was less heavy and paid almost the same. Advisor James helped me invest my savings wisely. Nothing risky, nothing complicated. Just secure investments that grew slowly but steadily. And then, 6 months ago, something unexpected happened. The lady I cared for passed away and left me money in her will. $200,000. She had no family, and in her letter, she explained that I had been more of a daughter to her in 2 years than many are in a lifetime. I wept when the lawyer read me that letter. I wept for the kindness of a stranger who had seen me when my own blood made me invisible. With that money, plus my savings, plus a mortgage that James helped me secure, I bought the $800,000 house, not because I needed it. My current house was enough for me. I bought it because I could, because I wanted to, because it was mine. And it was Margaret who unintentionally told my children. She ran into them at the supermarket and mentioned how proud she was of me. She mentioned the new house. She mentioned the exclusive neighborhood. 24 hours later, Harper and Caleb were at my door with a lawyer. Now, sitting in my empty living room, I understood something with absolute clarity. They had not come back for love. They had come back for money. And this time, I was ready for them. I got up and walked to my bedroom. From the back of the closet, I took out the black folder. I opened it and reviewed its contents once more. Documents, photographs, recordings, testimonies. 3 years of silent preparation. I smiled for the first time all day. Let them come with their lawyers. Let them come with their threats. Let them come with their sense of entitlement over my life. I had something to show them too. The following days were filled with a tense silence. I knew Harper and Caleb would not stay quiet. I knew them too well. They had tried the route of emotional blackmail, and it had failed. Now they would come with something stronger. I was not wrong. On Friday afternoon, while I was watering the plants in my garden, a black car parked in front of my house. I recognized the vehicle immediately. It was Harper's. She stepped out wearing dark sunglasses and expensive clothes, walking with those heels that clicked against the pavement like little hammers. Caleb came behind her, talking on the phone, acting self-important as always. But this time they were not alone. With them came a woman I did not know. I estimated she was about 50, a gray tailored suit, hair pulled back in a perfect bun, and an expression that could freeze hell over. I put down the watering can and walked toward the entrance. I was not going to let them in so easily this time. "Mom, we need to talk," announced Harper, taking off her sunglasses. Her voice sounded tired, as if she were the victim in all this. "We already spoke on Tuesday," I replied, crossing my arms. I said everything I had to say. The woman in the suit took a step forward. "Mrs. Vance, I am attorney Catherine Pierce, a specialist in family law and elder protection. Your children have hired me because they are genuinely concerned for your well-being. Elder protection. The words sounded like a threat disguised as care. I do not need protection, I said, looking directly at her. I am perfectly fine. Catherine pulled a folder from her briefcase. Mrs. Vance, your children have informed me about certain financial decisions you have made recently. Impulsive purchases of expensive properties at your age can be indicative of cognitive decline or undue influence from third parties. I was so surprised I almost laughed. Cognitive decline. Because a 67-year-old woman could not make financial decisions without there being something wrong with her head, Caleb approached with a worried expression that fooled me for not even a second. Mom, we just want to take care of you. We know that Mrs. Sullivan has been interfering in your life. Maybe she is manipulating you. At your age, it is easy to be deceived. Margaret does not manipulate me, I replied, feeling rage grow in my chest. Margaret is my friend, something you have never been. Harper let out a dramatic sigh. You see, counselor, that is how she talks to us. She treats us as if we were enemies when we only want to protect her. The lawyer nodded, taking notes. Mrs. Vance, your children are considering initiating a legal process to establish a conservatorship. That means a judge would evaluate your capacity to handle your own affairs. A conservatorship? They wanted to declare me incompetent. They wanted to take control of my own life, of my own money, of everything I had worked to achieve. You cannot do that, I said, though my voice trembled slightly. Catherine looked at me with something that might have passed for pity. Mrs. Vance, when there is evidence that a senior citizen is making decisions that put their assets at risk, the family has the right and obligation to intervene. Spending $800,000 on an unnecessary property at 67, distancing yourself from your family, isolating yourself with new friends, all of those are red flags. I am not isolating myself. I am liberating myself, I replied with all the firmness I could muster. Caleb took out his phone and started showing photos to the lawyer. Look, counselor, this is the house where my mother lived. Simple, but dignified. And this is the house she bought. It is ridiculously large for a single person. Clearly, someone convinced her to make this purchase. I convinced myself, I said, raising my voice. I decided to buy that house because I wanted to, because I worked all my life and finally I can treat myself. Harper shook her head. Mom, you have never been like this. You were always thrifty, sensible. This is not normal for you. That is why we are worried. Maybe you do not know me as well as you think, I replied. The lawyer closed her folder. Mrs. Vance, my clients have asked me to try to resolve this amicably before proceeding legally. If you agree to include Harper and Caleb's names on the deed of the new property, they would be willing to forget this whole matter of the conservatorship. There was the true motive behind this whole charade. They did not care about my well-being. They did not care about my mental health. They just wanted the house. And if I refuse, I asked, although I already knew the answer, then we will proceed with the legal evaluation, replied Catherine with a neutral voice. A psychological assessment will be requested. All your recent financial transactions will be reviewed, and a judge will determine if you are fit to manage your own assets. Caleb moved closer. Mom, it does not have to be like this. Just sign the papers and everything goes back to normal. You will keep living in your house. You will keep doing whatever you want. We just want to make sure that when something happens to you, there are no complications. When something happens to me, as if they were already planning my funeral again. Harper tried to touch my arm, but I took a step back. Mom, please, think of us. We are your children. We are your blood. You cannot prefer strangers over your own family. I looked her in the eyes. This 45-year-old woman who was once my baby, my little girl, my reason for getting up every morning. And I saw a stranger. I saw someone who had taken everything I offered and never gave anything back. I saw someone who loved me only to the extent that I was useful. I need you to leave my house, I said with a low but clear voice. Catherine put away her documents. Very well, Mrs. Vance. Consider yourself formally notified. Within 5 business days, you will receive the court summons. I hope you reconsider your position before then. The 3 turned around and walked toward the car. Before getting in, Caleb looked at me one last time. This is your fault, Mom. You are forcing us to do this." They drove off, leaving a cloud of dust and threats in the air. I closed the door and leaned against it, feeling my legs give way. But I did not cry. I did not allow myself that luxury. I walked to the phone and dialed Margaret's number. She answered on the second ring. "Maggie, I need help," I said simply. "I am on my way," she replied without asking questions. 20 minutes later, she was in my living room. I told her everything while she listened with an increasingly serious expression. When I finished, she took my hand. "Eleanor, those children of yours are playing dirty, but you have something they do not know you have." "The black folder?" I said, nodding. "Exactly. But you need professional legal help. You need someone who is on your side." She took out her phone and called someone. "James, it is Maggie. I need you to come to Eleanor's house right now. It is urgent." Mr. James Bennett arrived an hour later. He was no longer just my financial advisor. In these 3 years, he had become someone I trusted. I explained the situation while he took notes. "This is harassment and attempted covert fraud," he said finally. "They are using the legal system to intimidate you and force you to cede your property. But they are in for a surprise." I opened the black folder on the table. James began to review the documents one by one. With every page he turned, his expression became more serious and also more satisfied. "Eleanor, this is pure gold," he said after reviewing everything. "You have documentation of 3 years of negligence, abandonment, emotional extortion, and now attempted fraud. More importantly, you have this." He pointed to a specific document. I knew it well. It was a waiver signed by Harper and Caleb 3 years ago, when I got sick with pneumonia and was hospitalized. They refused to take charge of me. The hospital needed a responsible family member, and both signed documents rejecting that responsibility. They said they could not care for me, that they did not have the time or resources. "That document automatically disqualifies them from any conservatorship," explained James. "They themselves renounced their family responsibility. They cannot come now to claim it just because it suits them." Margaret smiled. Those 2 idiots dug their own grave. James organized all the documents. "I am going to prepare a countersuit, and I am going to request a temporary restraining order so they cannot harass you like this again." "But that is not all," I said, taking a deep breath. "There is something else I need to tell you." I took another envelope out of the folder. This one contained photographs and documents I had discovered 6 months ago. Evidence that Caleb had forged my signature on bank documents, trying to take money out of my account. Evidence that Harper had tried to sell my previous house without my authorization, forging papers. Both attempts had failed because the bank and the notary contacted me to verify. But I kept all the evidence. Every email, every forged document, every attempt. James looked at the papers with disbelief. "Eleanor, this is attempted fraud. This is a criminal offense." "I know," I replied. "That is why I kept it, because I knew that someday they would try again." Margaret hugged me. "You are stronger than they ever imagined." James started making calls. He contacted colleagues. He asked for favors. He pulled strings. By the time he left that night, we already had a complete plan. Harper and Caleb wanted war. They thought I was a helpless old lady they could scare with lawyers and legal threats. They did not know who they were messing with. They did not know I had spent 3 years preparing for exactly this moment. They did not know that the woman who cleaned floors had also learned to read contracts, to document abuse, to protect herself. I went to sleep that night calmer than I had been in days. The black folder rested on my table, ready to be opened before whoever necessary. And in 5 days, when that court summons arrived, I would be more than prepared to answer. The 5 days passed faster than I expected. During that time, James worked tirelessly preparing our defense. Margaret came every afternoon to keep me company and make sure I was okay. For the first time in a long time, I did not feel alone. On Wednesday morning, the court summons arrived just as they had promised. A uniformed man knocked on my door and handed me a thick manila envelope. I signed for it with a steady hand. He looked at me with something akin to pity, probably thinking I was another old woman being dragged into court by greedy family. If only he knew. I opened the envelope at my dining table. The legal language was complicated, full of technical words that were hard to understand, but the essence was clear. Harper Vance and Caleb Vance were requesting that my mental capacity to handle my own affairs be evaluated. They alleged cognitive decline, susceptibility to external manipulation, and erratic financial behavior. There was a date for a preliminary hearing, 10 days from that moment. There was also a list of evidence they planned to present, testimonies from neighbors who supposedly had seen me confused, records of my recent purchase qualifying it as impulsive and irrational, and something that froze my blood, a statement from a doctor I had never visited suggesting possible senile dementia. I called James immediately. "I already know," he said before I could speak. "I got a copy this morning. That doctor is a fraud who works for unscrupulous lawyers. He makes diagnoses without seeing patients in exchange for money. I already filed a formal complaint with the medical board, but they can use that against me," I said, feeling a knot in my stomach. "Not if we present real evidence first. I have a full evaluation scheduled for you tomorrow with Dr. Susan Miller, a prestigious neuropsychologist. She will do exhaustive tests and certify that you are in full command of your faculties." That night I barely slept. Not out of fear exactly, but out of rage. Rage that my own children were willing to defame me, to destroy my reputation, to invent diseases I did not have, all for money. The evaluation with Dr. Miller lasted 4 hours. She gave me tests on memory, logical reasoning, verbal comprehension, numerical analysis. She asked me about my history, my recent decisions, my future plans. It was exhaustive and exhausting. At the end, she smiled. "Mrs. Vance, you are more lucid than many 40-year-olds I see in my practice. Your memory is excellent, your reasoning is clear, and your financial decisions show careful planning, not impulsivity. I'm going to certify that in writing." I felt a huge weight lift off my shoulders. "Thank you, doctor." She took my hand. "I have seen many cases like yours. Adult children who wait to inherit and get impatient. It is more common than people think. Do not let them make you feel bad for taking care of yourself." With the medical certificate in hand, James strengthened our countersuit. But he had something else planned, something he explained to me in his office 2 days before the hearing. "Eleanor, we are going to do something they do not expect. We are going to take the offensive." He showed me documents he had prepared. A formal lawsuit against Harper and Caleb for attempted fraud, forgery of documents, and extortion. All the evidence I had collected for 3 years, now organized into a formal legal file. "But there is something else I need," he said, looking at me seriously. "I need you to bring the black folder to the preliminary hearing." "The black folder, my ace in the hole. They are going to want to negotiate when they see what we have," continued James. "But before showing our full arsenal, I want to see their faces when they understand that you are not defenseless." I nodded. "The folder will be with me." The day of the preliminary hearing dawned gray and cold. I dressed in my best clothes, a simple but dignified suit that Margaret had helped me choose. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that made me look like I was spending money irresponsibly. Just an elderly woman, presentable and serene. Margaret insisted on accompanying me. James picked us both up, and we went to the courthouse together. During the drive, we went over the plan one more time. "Let me do the talking," James reminded me. "If the judge asks you direct questions, answer calmly and clearly. Do not let yourself be provoked by anything Harper or Caleb say." In the courthouse parking lot, I saw Harper's car. She and Caleb were already there, along with attorney Catherine Pierce and the first lawyer, Richard Sterling. The 4 were talking in a group, sure of themselves, probably celebrating their victory in advance. When they saw me get out of the car with James and Margaret, their expressions changed. Surprise first, then annoyance. They did not expect me to bring serious legal representation. We entered the building in silence. The hallway smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Our footsteps echoed against the worn marble floor. We sat on hard wooden benches to wait our turn. Harper and Caleb sat on the other side of the aisle. I could feel their stares, but I did not turn to look at them. I kept my eyes forward, my back straight, my hands on my lap holding the black folder. "Mom," I heard Caleb's voice. "You can still fix this. Just talk to us." I did not respond. James had been clear. Zero communication with them outside the courtroom. Mrs. Vance, tried attorney Catherine Pierce. As a lawyer, I advise you to consider a settlement. Legal proceedings are expensive and draining. Why go through all this? My lawyer will respond to any formal proposal at the appropriate time, I said without looking at her. Margaret squeezed my hand, giving me strength. Finally, they called us. We entered a small room, with a long table and chairs on each side. It was not a formal court yet, just a preliminary hearing before a judicial mediator. A man of about 60, with thick glasses and the look of having seen everything in life. "Good morning," he began. "I am Mediator Albert Ross. I am here to listen to both sides and determine if this case proceeds to formal trial or if it can be resolved through agreement. Please, take a seat." We sat on opposite sides, Harper and Caleb with their 2 lawyers on one side, me with James and Margaret on the other. The black folder rested on the table in front of me. The mediator reviewed the documents. "We have here a request for conservatorship by the children, Harper Vance and Caleb Vance, alleging incapacity of their mother, Eleanor Vance, to handle her affairs. I also have a countersuit from attorney James Bennett, alleging harassment and extortion. This is unusual, Mr. Mediator," began Catherine Pierce. "My clients are children concerned for their mother's well-being. She has made questionable financial decisions recently, including the impulsive purchase of an $800,000 property she does not need. We believe she is being influenced by third parties with financial interests." James raised an eyebrow. "Third parties with financial interests? Are you referring to me or Mrs. Margaret Sullivan?" "I refer to anyone who is taking advantage of a vulnerable woman," replied Catherine. Margaret started to stand up indignant, but James gestured for her to calm down. "Mr. Mediator, allow me to present evidence," said James, pulling documents from his briefcase. "This is a certificate of a complete neuropsychological evaluation performed 3 days ago by Dr. Susan Miller, a certified professional with 30 years of experience. It confirms that Mrs. Eleanor Vance is in full command of her mental faculties, with cognitive capacity above average for her age." He handed the document to the mediator, who read it attentively. "I also have here," continued James, "my client's complete financial history for the last 5 years. As you will see, she has maintained a consistent pattern of saving and intelligent investment. The purchase of the property was not impulsive. It was planned over 18 months, with professional advice and funded through a combination of personal savings, a legitimate inheritance, and a mortgage loan that she qualifies perfectly to pay." Richard Sterling, the first lawyer, intervened. "That does not change the fact that a 67-year-old woman does not need an $800,000 house. It is an irrational expense." The mediator looked at him over his glasses. "Counselor, since when is it irrational for someone to buy a property with their own money, well advised and within their means?" Harper could not contain herself any longer. "It is our inheritance. She is squandering our future." The silence that followed was absolute. Even her own lawyers froze. Harper had just revealed the true motive behind everything. The mediator stared at her. "Miss Vance, did you just suggest that your mother has no right to use her own money because you consider it your inheritance?" Harper realized her mistake too late. "I didn't mean that. It's just that." "I believe she said exactly what she meant to say," interrupted James. "And that is the core of this case. My clients are not worried about their mother's well-being. They are worried about their access to her fortune." Caleb tried to regain control. "That is not true. We love our mother." "Really?" asked James with a dangerously soft voice. "Then tell me, Mr. Vance, when was the last time you visited your mother before finding out about the house purchase?" Caleb opened his mouth, but nothing came out. "I will tell you," continued James. 2.5 years ago. You did not visit her when she was hospitalized with pneumonia. You did not visit her on her birthday. You did not visit her on any holiday. That's not." "And now," interrupted James, placing another document on the table, "let's move on to something really interesting. It was the hospital document, the waiver signed by both. When your mother was gravely ill 3 years ago, the hospital needed to designate a responsible family member. Both you and your sister signed this document rejecting that responsibility. You formally declared that you could not and would not take care of her." The mediator read the document. Catherine Pierce tried to object, but the mediator raised his hand. "Let me see if I understand," he said slowly. You formally renounced responsibility for your mother when she needed you, but now you want to be granted conservatorship over her when she has money. Is that correct? It is more complicated than that, tried to explain Richard. No, the mediator interrupted him. It is exactly that simple. I looked at the black folder on the table. I still hadn't opened it. I still hadn't shown everything it contained. And we were already winning. James looked at me and nodded slightly. It was time to drop the final bomb. I placed my hands on the black folder. Everyone in the room noticed the gesture. The mediator looked at me with curiosity. Harper and Caleb exchanged nervous glances. Even their lawyers seemed uneasy. "Mr. Mediator," I said with a clear and firm voice, "there is something else you need to see." I opened the folder slowly, savoring every second. Inside were years of pain turned into evidence, years of silence transformed into power. I took out the first document and slid it toward the mediator. "This is a certified copy of my current will, dated 2 years ago. As you can see, neither Harper nor Caleb are included as beneficiaries." "What?" screamed Harper, standing up. "That is not legal. We are your children." The mediator raised his hand, asking for silence. "Miss Vance, sit down. Please, continue, Mrs. Vance." I took out the second set of documents. These are bank statements from the last 5 years. As you will see, during that period I made transfers to my children totaling $140,000, loans they requested, but never paid back. Not a single cent. Caleb went pale. "Mom, that was family help. You didn't have to keep score." "Family help," I repeated, feeling years of frustration rise in my throat. "When I lent you $20,000 for your supposed business that never took off, you told me you would pay it back in 6 months. That was 4 years ago." Harper intervened. "We helped you too. Mom, we gave you a place to live." "A place to live?" My voice rose in pitch. "I paid rent in my own house when Caleb lived with me, $500 a month that he never contributed to. And you, Harper, the only time you invited me to your house, you made me feel so out of place I left crying." The mediator kept reading the documents with an increasingly serious expression. I took more papers out of the folder. These are emails and text messages from the last 3 years. In them, you can see how my children contacted me only when they needed money, never to ask how I was, never to invite me to lunch, only when they needed something. James took the documents and passed them to the mediator. "We also have here evidence of something more serious, Mr. Mediator." I took out the envelope I had been waiting to use. My hand trembled slightly, not from fear but from anticipation. Inside were copies of bank documents with signatures that were not mine. 8 months ago, I continued, I tried to access my savings account and discovered that someone had tried to make a withdrawal of $50,000. The bank contacted me because the signature did not match exactly with the one on file. When they investigated, they discovered that someone had forged my signature. Harper and Caleb's lawyers tensed up. Catherine Pierce tried to interrupt, but the mediator silenced her with a look. The bank's investigation revealed that the forged document was presented by my son, Caleb. Here is the bank's security report. And here, the security camera footage showing Caleb presenting the false documents. Caleb turned white as a sheet. That was a misunderstanding. I thought I had your authorization." "A misunderstanding?" asked James with an icy voice. "Forging your mother's signature is a misunderstanding? But there is more," I continued, feeling a strange calm. "A year ago, I was contacted by a notary asking if I really wanted to sell my previous house. Someone had initiated sales proceedings without my knowledge. That person was my daughter, Harper." "Liar!" screamed Harper. "I would never do that." I took out more documents. Here is the complaint I filed with the notary. Here are the forged documents with my supposed signature authorizing the sale. And here, Mr. Mediator, is the handwriting analysis confirming that signature is not mine. Also, the log of phone calls from Harper to the notary, pretending to be me. The silence in the room was so thick you could cut it with a knife. My children's lawyers seemed to be in shock. Richard Sterling was frantically checking his own documents as if looking for an exit. Catherine Pierce had closed her portfolio and seemed to be calculating how to distance herself from her clients. The mediator took off his glasses and cleaned them slowly. His expression was indecipherable. "Mrs. Vance, Are you telling me that your children tried to steal from you through fraud on 2 separate occasions? Yes, sir. And I have documented evidence of both attempts. The bank decided not to proceed legally because I did not want to press charges at that moment. The notary also did not proceed because we stopped the fraud in time. But I kept all the evidence because I knew that someday I would need it. James stood up. Mr. Mediator, as you can see, this is not a case of children concerned for a vulnerable mother. This is a case of adult children with a documented pattern of attempted fraud who, seeing their illegal efforts frustrated, now try to use the legal system to get what they could not steal. Catherine Pierce finally spoke. Mr. Mediator? I had no knowledge of any of these accusations. My clients told me their mother was being manipulated, because that is what they wanted you to believe, replied James. But the evidence tells another story. The mediator looked at Harper and Caleb. He had that type of look that only comes from years of seeing the worst of human nature in courtrooms. Do you have anything to say in your defense? Caleb tried to speak, but his voice came out as a whisper. Mom, we just needed the money. You weren't using it. But it was mine, I said, feeling tears I refused to shed. It was the result of 67 years of work, of sacrifice, of getting up every day when my body begged for rest, and you believed you had a right to take it just because. Harper tried one last attack. You owe us, Mom. You raised us. That was your obligation, but you also owe us for all those years. What do I owe you? I repeated incredulously. I gave you a university education that cost me years of extra work. I gave you every cent you asked for. I gave you a home, food, clothes. I gave you everything, and you gave me 2 years of silence when I was most alone. I pulled another document from the folder. This is a letter I wrote to you a year and a half ago when I got out of the hospital after the pneumonia. I never sent it because I knew you wouldn't read it. In it, I told you how scared I was, how alone I felt, how having no one in that hospital was the most painful part of the whole illness. My voice broke slightly, but I continued. Margaret was a neighbor back then. She was the one who visited me every day. She was the one who paid for medicine I couldn't afford. She was more family in 2 weeks than you were in a lifetime. Margaret took my hand across the table. The mediator watched everything with a grave expression. Mr. Mediator, intervened James. My client is not only defending herself against an unjust conservatorship, she is prepared to file formal charges for attempted fraud and forgery of documents against both children. We have all the necessary evidence. We have only waited to give them a chance to retract and desist from this farce. Richard Sterling and Catherine Pierce looked at each other. Clearly, they had not signed up to defend criminals. Catherine spoke first. Mr. Mediator, I request a recess to consult with my clients. Denied, replied the mediator firmly. I think I have heard enough, and I think these young people need to hear something very clear. He stood up, and we all did the same. Caleb Vance, Harper Vance, what you have attempted to do here today is a perversion of the legal system. Using elder protection laws as a tool for extortion is despicable, but attempting to do it against a mother who is clearly more mentally capable than you is pathetic. Harper tried to protest, but the mediator continued. I have reviewed the evidence presented. Mrs. Eleanor Vance is in full command of her faculties. Her financial decisions are rational and well-planned. The request for conservatorship is completely denied. Mom, please, pleaded Caleb. Don't do this. I looked him in the eye. I didn't do anything. You did all this. I am just defending myself. The mediator spoke again. Furthermore, I am forwarding copies of all this evidence to the district attorney to evaluate whether criminal charges for fraud and forgery are appropriate. Mrs. Vance, do you wish to press formal charges? All eyes were fixed on me. This was the moment to decide if I wanted complete justice or if there was still something of a mother in me willing to forgive. I looked at Harper with her eyes full of crocodile tears. I looked at Caleb with his expression of a misunderstood victim, and I knew the answer. Yes, I said with a firm voice. I wish to press formal charges against both of them. Harper collapsed in her chair. Caleb went pale. Their lawyers started packing their things quickly, clearly wanting to distance themselves from the disaster. The mediator signed several documents. This hearing is concluded. The defendants will be formally notified of the charges against them. I suggest you get good criminal defense lawyers, because you are going to need them. We left that room in silence. In the hallway, Margaret hugged me tight. You did it, Eleanor. You really did it. James smiled with professional satisfaction. That was perfect. The evidence was devastating. But I did not feel triumph yet. I felt a strange emptiness. I had waited for this moment for so long, and now that it had arrived, I felt strangely calm. Behind us, I heard the hurried steps of Harper and Caleb leaving the building. I did not turn to look at them. There was nothing more to say. The black folder rested under my arm. It had fulfilled its purpose. But the story hadn't ended yet. The final act was still missing. The following days were strange. I expected to feel relieved after the preliminary hearing, but instead, I felt a mix of emotions I couldn't name. I had won the legal battle. I had exposed my children. I had protected my assets, but I had also lost something I would never get back. James called me 3 days after the preliminary hearing. Eleanor, I need you to come to my office. Things have happened. I arrived that afternoon with Margaret. James had documents scattered over his desk and an expression I couldn't completely decipher. There was some satisfaction, but also concern. Sit down, he said, pointing to the chairs in front of his desk. I have good news and news that is going to make you angry. Let's start with the bad, I said, bracing myself. The DA reviewed the evidence we presented and decided to proceed with the charges. That's good. But during the investigation, they discovered something else. James pulled out a new folder. Harper and Caleb didn't just try to defraud you. They also forged documents to obtain a loan using your house as collateral without your knowledge. I froze. What? About a year ago, continued James. The two of them partnered up and submitted documents to a private lender requesting a loan of $200,000. They used your property as collateral, forged your signature on all the documents, and even paid someone to impersonate you on a verification video call. Margaret exploded. Those bastards. $200,000. The loan was approved, James went on. They received the money, but never made a single payment. The bank started foreclosure proceedings against your property 6 months ago. You never knew because they intercepted all the bank's correspondence. I felt like the floor was moving under my feet. My house. They were going to take my house for a debt I didn't even know existed. How did they intercept my mail? I asked with a trembling voice. Caleb had a key to your house, remembered Margaret. He lived with you for years. He probably never gave it back. James nodded. Exactly. They checked your mailbox regularly, took everything related to the bank, and you never found out. The bank thought it was you who wasn't responding to their demands. And now? I asked, feeling panic grow in my chest. Are they going to take my house? No, replied James with a small smile. And here come the good news. When the bank discovered the fraud, they immediately canceled the foreclosure process. They were also victims. Now they are cooperating fully with the district attorney's office. And better yet, they are suing Harper and Caleb for the $200,000 plus interest and penalties. That adds up to almost $300,000. Do they have that money? Asked Margaret. James shook his head. No. According to the bank's investigation, they spent it all in less than 6 months. Harper completely renovated her condo, bought a new car, took 2 trips to Europe. Caleb invested in another failed business and spent the rest on who knows what. So they are never going to pay, I said, feeling a mix of justice and sadness. Probably not, admitted James, but the bank is going to seize everything they have. Harper's condo, her car, everything. Caleb has nothing to seize because he has never had anything. Both will likely end up bankrupt and with criminal records. I leaned back in the chair trying to process all this information. My children had not only abandoned me, not only tried to steal from me, but they had put the roof over my head at risk, and all for money they squandered on empty and superficial things. There is more, continued James. The DA wants you to testify at a formal hearing next week. They are going to formalize the charges and need your full statement. I'll be there, I replied without hesitation. Eleanor, said James with a softer tone. You are still in time to withdraw the charges. I know they are your children. I know this is painful. I looked directly at him. James, if I withdraw the charges, what will they learn? That they can do whatever they want because in the end, Mom always forgives them? I already spent my whole life teaching them that there are no consequences for their actions. It is time they learned differently. Margaret squeezed my hand. I am proud of you. That night, alone in my house, I checked the locks on all the doors. I called a locksmith and changed all the deadbolts. Caleb would never have access again. I checked my mailbox and indeed found some letters that looked like they had been tampered with. I installed a security camera pointing directly at the mailbox. I also did something else. I took an old box from the back of my closet. Inside were photographs of when Harper and Caleb were little. Harper in her first party dress, Caleb in his soccer uniform, photos of birthdays, graduations, Christmases that were once happy. I looked at those photos for hours. I tried to remember at what moment those smiling children became the greedy adults who now faced criminal charges. I tried to find the exact moment everything broke. Maybe it was when Bob died and I had to work so much that I was never really present. Maybe it was when I gave them everything they asked for without teaching them the value of effort. Maybe it was when I allowed them to disrespect me the first time and said nothing. Or maybe it wasn't my fault at all. Maybe that was just who they were. I put the photos back in the box. I didn't throw them away because I couldn't. But I didn't take them out again either. The next day, Harper called my phone. I let it ring until it went to voicemail. She left a message. Her voice sounded different, smaller, more scared. Mom, it's me. Please, pick up. I need to talk to you. This got out of control. We didn't mean for it to go this far. Please, Mom, we can fix this. We are family. I deleted the message without a second thought. Caleb also tried to contact me. He sent text messages. Mom, please, we made mistakes, but we are your children. You can't do this. They are going to put us in jail. I didn't reply. That night I received a call from an unknown number. I answered out of curiosity. Mrs. Vance? It was a young woman's voice I didn't recognize. Yes. Who is this? My name is Jessica. I am Caleb's wife. I need to speak with you. I didn't know Caleb had gotten married. He had never told me. Please, go on, I said cautiously. Mrs. Vance. I know Caleb did terrible things. I didn't know anything about this until the legal papers arrived. But I have a 6-month-old baby. Your granddaughter, and if Caleb goes to prison, I don't know how I am going to support her alone. I felt a dagger in my chest. A granddaughter. I had a 6-month-old granddaughter and no one had told me. Why are you calling me? I asked, although I already knew the answer. Because I need you to withdraw the charges. Please, not for Caleb, but for your granddaughter. She is innocent in all this. I closed my eyes. Jessica, I am very sorry for your situation. I am sorry that my son has put you in this position. But what he did has consequences. I cannot protect him from those consequences. But your granddaughter, my granddaughter, I interrupted her with a firm voice, has a mother who seems to care about her. That is more than many children have. And maybe, just maybe, this teaches her father to be a better man. But I am not going to withdraw the charges. She started crying. Please, Mrs. Vance, please. I hung up the phone. And then I allowed myself to cry for the first time in this whole process. I cried for the granddaughter I didn't know. I cried for the desperate mother. I cried for the children I had lost long before this legal battle. But I didn't change my mind. Margaret arrived an hour later. I had sent her a text saying she was on her way. We sat in my living room with hot tea. Did you hear? She asked. That I have a granddaughter? Yes. Caleb got married and had a baby and didn't even bother to tell me. Margaret shook her head. I cannot believe the cruelty of that boy. His wife called me. I told her. She asked me to withdraw the charges for the baby. And what did you tell her? That no. Margaret hugged me. I know it hurts. But you are doing the right thing. Am I? I asked with a broken voice. I have a granddaughter who will grow up without knowing me, just like I grew up without her parents in my life. You didn't cause this, Eleanor. They did. And that baby has a mother. She has a chance to be better off than her father. We spent the rest of the night in shared silence, the kind of silence that can only be shared by two women who have survived too much. The next day, a certified letter arrived. It was from Harper and Caleb's lawyers, a settlement offer. They would plead guilty to lesser charges in exchange for me withdrawing the main lawsuit. They would pay restitution in installments. They would do community service, but they would not go to prison. I called James and read him the letter. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "What do you advise me?" "As a lawyer, I tell you that a settlement guarantees some restitution and avoids a long trial. As a friend, I tell you to do what lets you sleep in peace at night." I thought about the baby I didn't know. I thought about Jessica crying on the phone. I thought about my children who were once innocent kids, but I also thought about 67 years of putting everyone before myself. 67 years of yielding, of forgiving, of forgetting. "No," I said finally. "I do not accept the deal. Let the DA proceed with all charges." "Are you sure?" "More sure than I have been in my entire life." James sighed. "All right. I will inform the lawyers." I hung up the phone and looked out the window. The garden needed work. The flowers were neglected. Weeds were growing between the stones. It was time to start taking care of myself with the same dedication I had taken care of others all my life. I grabbed my garden tools and went out into the sun. As I pulled the weeds, I felt something akin to peace. The storm wasn't over, but I was standing firm in the middle of it. The week before the formal hearing passed in a strange calm. I had rejected the deal, and now everything would follow its legal course. James had explained to me that the process could take months, but with the evidence we had, the result was almost certain. I had made a decision, and I would stand firm. But that didn't mean it was easy. Monday morning, while I was making coffee, I heard a car park in front of my house. I looked out the window and saw an official vehicle. 2 people got out, a middle-aged woman with a briefcase and a uniformed man. They knocked on my door with firm, professional knocks. I opened cautiously, keeping the security chain on. "Mrs. Eleanor Vance?" asked the woman, showing an ID. "I am social worker Valerie Marks, and this is Officer Mark Davis. We are coming on behalf of the district attorney's office." I let them in after verifying their credentials. We sat in the living room and Valerie took out some documents. "Mrs. Vance, we are here because the case against your children has escalated. The DA has decided to treat it as aggravated fraud and conspiracy. That means the consequences are more serious than initially thought." I nodded without saying anything. Officer Davis spoke with a deep but kind voice. "We are also investigating if there were more victims. Your case is not isolated. We have discovered that Caleb Vance has a pattern of minor frauds in the last 5 years. Small scams that were never formally reported." I wasn't surprised. Caleb had always had a knack for convincing people, for making promises he never kept. Now I knew it wasn't just irresponsibility. It was a deliberate pattern. Valerie continued. "The reason for our visit is twofold. First, we need you to sign some additional documents authorizing full access to your financial records for the investigation. Second, we want to make sure you are okay, that you have support during this process." I signed the documents without hesitation. And yes, I have support. I have friends who have been with me. "Family?" asked Valerie. "The one I have is being prosecuted by justice," I replied with a bitter smile. Valerie nodded with understanding. She had seen this before. It showed in her eyes. "I have worked many cases of family and financial abuse against seniors, more than people imagine. You are doing the right thing by defending yourself." "I don't feel like I'm doing the right thing," I admitted. "I feel like I'm destroying my own children." "Mrs. Vance," said Officer Davis, leaning forward, "you are not destroying anything. They made their decisions. They committed crimes. You are simply refusing to be an accomplice to those crimes by protecting them." After they left, I sat in my living room for a long time. The weight of all this was starting to feel real. My children were going to face serious consequences, possibly prison, definitely criminal records that would ruin their lives. And I was the one who had set it all in motion. The phone rang, pulling me out of my thoughts. It was Margaret. "Eleanor, turn on the news, Channel 7. I grabbed the remote with trembling hands. On the screen appeared a reporter in front of the courthouse. "In local news, 2 adults have been arrested on charges of multiple fraud and forgery. Harper Vance, 45, and Caleb Vance, 39, were detained this morning in an operation coordinated by the district attorney's office." I felt like I had been punched in the stomach. "Arrested? I didn't know that would happen so soon," the reporter continued. The siblings are accused of defrauding multiple victims, including their own 6-7-year-old mother, for amounts exceeding $400,000. The DA describes this as a pattern of criminal behavior that spanned years. The screen showed Harper being escorted by police, her hands handcuffed, her face hidden behind dark glasses. Then Caleb, with his head down, entering a police vehicle. My baby. My boy. That was how I saw them in that moment. Not as the adult criminals they were, but as the children they once were. I turned off the TV. The phone started ringing immediately. Unknown numbers, probably reporters. I didn't answer any. Margaret arrived 30 minutes later. She found me sitting in the same spot, staring at the black TV screen. "Eleanor," she said softly. "They arrested them," I whispered. "They handcuffed them like common criminals, because they committed crimes, not common ones, but serious ones. They are my children, Maggie. I carried them in my womb. I nursed them. I taught them to walk, and they chose to use those legs to walk down the wrong path. You didn't do that. They did." The doorbell rang. Margaret went to open it. It was James with a serious expression. "Eleanor, I need to talk to you," he said, sitting down. The DA moved fast because they discovered something else. Caleb was planning to flee the country. He had plane tickets purchased for tonight. That's why they ordered the immediate arrests. "Flee?" I repeated incredulously. "Was he going to leave his wife and baby?" "Apparently yes," confirmed James. His wife, Jessica, was the one who alerted the authorities. She found the tickets and false documents Caleb had prepared. There was only one ticket, just for him. Up until the end, Caleb only thought of himself. "The bail hearing is tomorrow," continued James. "The DA is going to argue that both are flight risks. They will probably remain detained until the trial." "How long?" I asked. "If they don't get bail, they could be in preventive detention for 3 or 4 months until there is a trial. Afterward, if they are found guilty, it could be between 2 and 7 years depending on all the charges." I closed my eyes. Years. My children would spend years in prison. "Eleanor," said James with a soft tone, "you can still talk to the DA. You can still ask for leniency, not for the charges to be dropped. That is no longer possible with the other victims involved. But you could ask them to consider reduced sentences." I thought about it. I really thought about it. But then I remembered the call from Jessica crying. I remembered that Caleb was going to abandon his own daughter. I remembered the $200,000 that risked my house. I remembered every time they made me feel invisible, useless, disposable. "No," I said finally. "Let justice take its course." The next day was the bail hearing. James warned me I didn't have to go, that it was just a procedure, but I felt I needed to be there. Margaret insisted on accompanying me. We arrived early and sat on the back benches. The room filled up quickly. I recognized Jessica sitting on the other side, holding a small baby. My granddaughter. The girl had Caleb's eyes, the same face shape. I felt physical pain in my chest. Harper and Caleb were brought in, handcuffed, dressed in prison uniforms. They looked gaunt, scared, small. Harper saw me and her eyes filled with tears. She moved her lips, forming the word "Mom," but made no sound. I looked away. The judge entered and began the hearing. The DA presented his case. Flight risk demonstrated by Caleb's plane tickets. Multiple victims. Solid evidence of premeditation. He requested they remain detained without bail. The defense lawyers, new ones because Richard and Catherine had withdrawn from the case, argued that both had roots in the community, that Harper had a condo and a job, that Caleb had family. The judge listened to everything with a neutral expression. Finally, he spoke. "Considering the gravity of the charges, the pattern of criminal behavior, and the demonstrated flight risk, I deny bail for Caleb Vance. In the case of Harper Vance, I set bail at $200,000. $200,000, the same amount they had stolen. Harper didn't have that money. Her condo was being foreclosed on by the bank. She couldn't pay. Both would remain in prison until the trial." Harper collapsed, crying. Caleb stared ahead with an empty expression. The guards took them out of the room. Jessica approached me in the hallway. She held the baby against her chest. "Mrs. Vance," she said with a tired voice, "I just want you to know that I am going to divorce Caleb. I don't want my daughter growing up thinking this type of behavior is normal." She paused. I also want to apologize for calling you that night. It wasn't my place to ask you to protect Caleb. You are right. He has to face the consequences. I looked her in the eyes. This young woman who had been deceived by my son. What is the baby's name? I asked softly. Lily, she replied. Lily Vance. It is a beautiful name, I said. And then, without thinking, I added, when all this is over, if you ever need anything, here is my number. I gave her my card. She took it with surprise. Why would you do that for me? I am the wife of the man who tried to steal from you. You are the mother of my granddaughter, I replied. And you are not to blame for Caleb's decisions. If Lily ever wants to meet her grandmother, my door will be open. Jessica started crying. Thank you, Mrs. Vance, thank you. She left with the baby. Margaret hugged me. That was beautiful, Eleanor. I don't know, I said honestly. Maybe I am being foolish again. No, said Margaret firmly. You are being human. There is a difference between setting boundaries and closing your heart completely. You are setting boundaries with your children, but that baby is innocent. That night, alone at home, I thought a lot about everything that had happened. In a week, my life had changed completely. My children were in prison. I had testified against them. I had met my granddaughter. I had offered help to the woman my son had abandoned. And strangely, despite all the pain, I felt more at peace than in years. Because for the first time, I wasn't protecting anyone from their own decisions. I wasn't allowing them to use me. I wasn't sacrificing myself for people who didn't value me. I was choosing myself. And that choice, although painful, was right. The trial began 3 months later. 3 months, during which Harper and Caleb remained in preventive detention. 3 months in which I didn't try to visit them a single time. 3 months in which I rebuilt my life piece by piece. The courtroom was full. Besides my case, 5 other victims of Caleb's frauds had appeared. Small business owners he had scammed with investment promises. An elderly woman he had convinced to lend him money for a fictitious business. Harper also had her own victims, mainly related to resale schemes of products she never delivered. James had prepared me exhaustively for my testimony, but nothing prepared me to see my children sitting on the defendant's bench, dressed in cheap suits their public defenders had gotten them, looking at me with a mix of shame and resentment. The DA called me to the stand on the second day of the trial. I walked with my head held high, swore to tell the truth, and sat down. Mrs. Vance, began the DA. Can you tell the jury what your relationship was with the defendants? They are my children, I replied with a clear voice. Harper is my eldest daughter. Caleb is my youngest son. I raised them alone after my husband died 25 years ago. And how would you describe your relationship with them in the last few years? Non-existent until they discovered I had bought a new house. Then they appeared demanding I put their names on the deed. The DA guided me through the whole story. I told them about the years of abandonment, about the illness and the hospital document where they renounced caring for me, about the attempted frauds with the bank and the notary, about the fraudulent loan of $200,000 that almost cost me my house. I spoke for almost 2 hours. The jury listened attentively. Some took notes. An older woman in the second row had tears in her eyes. When Harper's defense lawyer cross-examined me, he tried to paint me as a vengeful mother, as someone exaggerating small family misunderstandings. Is it not true, Mrs. Vance, that you are resentful because your children made their own lives? He asked with a condescending tone. I am not resentful because they made their lives, I replied, looking directly at him. I am protecting mine from their attempts to destroy it. Caleb's lawyer tried a different approach. Mrs. Vance, doesn't it seem cruel to send your own children to prison? Does it seem cruel that they tried to leave me homeless by forging documents? I replied. Does it seem cruel that they abandoned me when I was critically ill in a hospital? I didn't send them to prison. They sent themselves with their decisions. The most impactful testimony came from a surprise witness the DA presented on the third day. A 72-year-old woman named Evelyn Miller, who turned out to be a distant cousin of my late husband Bob. I knew Eleanor when she was 25, testified Evelyn. I saw how she worked to exhaustion to give those two everything they needed. I saw how they treated her for years as if she were their personal servant instead of their mother. And did you witness any of the incidents mentioned in this case? Asked the DA. I was in the hospital when Harper and Caleb refused to take charge of Eleanor. I heard Harper say verbatim that she wasn't going to ruin her life taking care of a sick old woman. Eleanor was 64 at that time and had been on the verge of dying from pneumonia. The silence in the room was absolute. Harper kept her head down. Caleb stared at the table. I was also present, continued Evelyn, when Eleanor discovered the attempt to sell her house without her permission. I saw the forged documents. I saw how Harper tried to convince her she had signed those papers and simply didn't remember. She tried to make her believe she was losing her memory. The trial lasted 2 full weeks. Witnesses paraded through, documents were presented, evidence was shown. The banks confirmed the frauds, the notary confirmed the forgery, the other victims told their stories. Harper and Caleb barely testified in their own defense. Their lawyers had advised silence because every time they opened their mouths, they worsened their situation. On the day of closing arguments, the DA summarized with devastating clarity. This is not a case of family misunderstandings. It is a case of 2 individuals who systematically exploited, manipulated, and defrauded multiple victims, including their own mother. The evidence is overwhelming. The premeditation is clear. Justice demands they face the full consequences of their acts. The defense lawyers did what they could, but there wasn't much to argue against mountains of documentary evidence and consistent testimonies. The jury retired to deliberate. Margaret and I waited in the hallway. James paced nervously, although he said he was sure of the result. They took barely 4 hours. Record time for a case like this, commented James. It's a good sign. We went back into the room. The jury returned. The judge asked for the verdict. In the case of the state versus Caleb Vance, how does the jury find the defendant? Guilty on all counts, replied the jury foreman. In the case of the state versus Harper Vance, guilty on all counts. Caleb closed his eyes. Harper started crying. I remained motionless, feeling a strange emptiness. The judge announced that sentencing would be handed down in 2 weeks. But everyone knew what was coming. With convictions for multiple fraud, forgery, and conspiracy, both faced several years in prison. We left the courthouse in silence. Outside, reporters were waiting. They surrounded me with microphones and cameras. Mrs. Vance, how do you feel now that your children have been found guilty? I looked at the cameras. I feel sad because we reached this point. I feel relieved because the truth came out. And I feel at peace because I finally defended myself. Any message for your children? I hope they use this time to reflect on their decisions. And I hope someday they understand that the consequences of their actions are not punishment, but justice. We walked away through the sea of reporters. Margaret hugged me tight. It's over, Eleanor. It's over. But I knew it wasn't entirely over. The sentencing was still missing. Closing this chapter completely was still missing. And I still had to decide what to do with the rest of my life. 2 weeks later, I returned to court for the final sentencing. This time, I went alone. Margaret had offered to accompany me, but I needed to do this by myself. I needed to close this cycle with my own strength. The room was less full than during the trial. Only those directly involved remained. I saw Jessica sitting on the back benches, without the baby this time. She greeted me with a discreet nod. I responded the same way. The judge entered, and we all stood up. Harper and Caleb were brought in for the last time. They looked different after months in prison. Thinner, paler, older. Harper had lost all that arrogance that had always characterized her. Caleb looked like a ghost of himself. The judge reviewed the documents in front of him. He had read the whole case, all the statements, all the evidence. Finally, he spoke. Caleb Vance and Harper Vance have been found guilty of multiple charges of fraud, forgery of documents, and conspiracy. I have exhaustively reviewed this case, and I must say it is one of the most disturbing I have seen in my 20 years on the bench. He paused. Not only did you commit serious crimes against multiple victims, but you did so against the person who loved you most, who sacrificed the most for you. Your own mother, Caleb Vance. For the charges against you, I sentence you to 5 years in state prison, plus full restitution to all identified victims. Harper Vance. For the charges against you, I sentence you to 4 years in state prison, plus full restitution to all victims. 5 years. 4 years. My children would spend years behind bars. But the judge wasn't finished. Furthermore, I order that both maintain a permanent restraining order regarding their mother, Eleanor Vance. You may not contact her in any way without her express written consent. This order will remain in effect even after serving your sentences." Harper sobbed loudly. Caleb kept his head down. The guards approached to take them away. At that moment, Harper looked directly at me. "Mom," she said with a broken voice. "Mom, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." I remained silent. I had no words to give her. Forgiveness wasn't something I could offer yet. Maybe never. They took them out of the room. Jessica approached me in the hallway. "Mrs. Vance, I am going to take Lily to visit him once a month. Not because he deserves it, but because she has the right to know who her father is, even if he is a criminal." I nodded. "That is a wise decision." She hesitated a moment. "Can I bring her to visit you too? So she knows her grandmother." I felt something warm in my chest. "I would love that," I replied honestly. I left the courthouse for the last time. The sun was shining brightly. I took a deep breath, feeling the weight of months of tension finally beginning to lift from my shoulders. James was waiting for me outside. "It's done, Eleanor. Officially over. Thank you, James, for everything." He smiled. "Now go live your life. You earned it." And that was exactly what I did. A month later, I moved into my new house, the $800,000 one in Oak Creek Estates. Margaret helped me with the move. Between the two of us, we filled that huge house with laughter, with plans, with hope. I turned one room into a sewing studio, picking up a hobby I had abandoned decades ago. Another room I prepared as a guest room for when Jessica brought Lily. I filled the garden with flowers and plants that I tended to every morning. Margaret moved to a house 3 blocks away. We saw each other almost every day, drank coffee together, walked in the park, went to the movies. For the first time in my life, I had time to live, not just to survive. Jessica kept her word. Every 2 weeks, she brought Lily to visit me. The baby grew before my eyes. She took her first steps in my living room. Her first word was Grandma. I became what I could never be with my own children, a present, loving figure, without the pressure of carrying everything on my shoulders. Years passed. Harper got out of prison after 3 years for good behavior. She didn't try to contact me. I heard through third parties that she had moved to another city, that she worked a modest job, that she was in therapy. I hoped she found peace, but I didn't need to be part of her life for that to happen. Caleb served his full sentence. Jessica had divorced him long before. When he got out, he didn't try to look for me either. Lily was 6 years old by then and barely remembered him. She called me Grandma, and I was the only grandmother she knew. On my 70th birthday, Margaret organized a party in my garden. The friends I had made in the neighborhood came. James came with his wife, Jessica came with Lily, Dr. Miller came, who had become a close friend. While I cut the cake, surrounded by people who genuinely loved me, who valued me, who chose to be with me not out of obligation, but out of love, I realized something fundamental. I had spent 67 years of my life believing that love was demonstrated with sacrifice, believing that being a good mother meant giving everything to my children regardless of the cost to myself, believing that setting boundaries was selfishness. But I was wrong. True love includes respect. Sacrifice without reciprocity is not love, it is exploitation. And taking care of myself was not only not selfishness, it was necessary to be the best version of me for those who really valued me. That night, after everyone left, I sat on my porch looking at the stars. In my lap rested the black folder, now empty. It had fulfilled its purpose. I no longer needed to keep evidence or protect myself with documents. Justice had triumphed. But, more importantly, I had triumphed. I had reclaimed my life. I had reclaimed my dignity. I had reclaimed my voice. And although the path had been painful, although I had lost my children in the process, I had gained something much more valuable. I had gained myself. That $800,000 house wasn't just a property. It was the symbol of my freedom. It was the proof that I mattered, that I deserved good things, that my life had value beyond what I could give to others. And no one, ever again, would make me forget that. I closed my eyes and smiled. At 70 years old, I had finally learned the most important lesson of all. That true family is not the one that shares your blood, but the one that shares your life with love, respect, and reciprocity. And I, Eleanor Vance, had a beautiful family, one that I had chosen and that had chosen me back. This was my victory. This was my peace. This was my happy ending. And I had achieved it by finally being, for the first time in my life, the protagonist of my own story.